Not working. There we are. We're on now. If Tydia is around, could we test the translation headsets, please? I can't see Tydia because he's up in the gallery, but if you could start talking and we'll just test them. If your headset is working, could you wave, please? That looks like lots of waving to me. Just while I have your attention, we have been told there are no planned fire alarm tests while we're here. So if a fire alarm goes off, we need to assume it's real. There are fire exits through those glass doors on that side of the room and also back out through the way you came in. And we will be starting very shortly. Thank you. One more thing to bring to your attention, if I can have your attention for a moment. If you come to speak, we've slightly changed the way traffic lights work here. So you'll remember from previous governing bodies, there's been a little set of traffic lights on the lectern. If you turn round and look at the screen over there, you'll see a countdown timer. So that is the modern replacement for traffic lights, and we've deliberately put the screen in your line of sight. So if it goes to 0, the chair will ring a bell, and I'm afraid that's the signal to stop. Oh, there you are. The timer is running for me, but I'm not going to talk for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Wel, yn swyddogol gyfeillion croeso cynnes mawr I bob un ohonoch chi. I am going to speak in Welsh to begin with. If you want to avail yourselves of the translation facilities, please do. Mae'n bleser mawr I ni fod yma unwaith eto yn Llanbedr Pont Steffan, a mae'n cyfarfod unwaith eto croeso cynnes mawr I bob un ohonoch chi. Cyn I ni troi at y croeso ffurfiol, dwi am jyst wneud cwbl o gyhoeddiadau. Yn gyntaf, dwi mor ddiolchgar i'n caplan I y parchedig James Tout sydd yn gofalu am ein haddoliad ni. Heno bydd yna gwasanaeth yn y capel unwaith eto a bydd gweddiau ar ystyried Beibl yma yn y neuadd. Mae Anna Marel wedi datgan bydd ITV a'r BBX yma, efallai, just mwyn I bawb cael gwybod drwy'r anerchiad y llywydd ac yn ein plith bydd BBX a'r ITV yn bresennol hefyd. Mae yna byrddau tu allan y neuadd yma sydd yn golygu sawl sydd yma enghraifft Clergy Support Trust, Open Doors Wales, Cymorth Cristnogol Cymru ac yn y blaen. Mae yna croeso mawr I bob un ohonoch chi gweld beth sydd ar y byrddau tu allan y neuadd yma. I'll turn to English now for this a bit more complex. Can I just refer you to the way in which motions take place in the life of the governing body? You will be asked, as ever, to debate and also to vote on various motions set out within the agenda, and supporting papers have been distributed. If any amendments to motions are to be suggested, 2 written copies of the proposed amendments are required, signed by the proposer, and they should be given to the lay secretary, Canon Simon Lloyd, here to my left. There are going to be motions. If you do wish to make amendments, please follow that protocol. They can, of course, be registered by email as well. amendments@churchinwales.org.uk, and the lay secretary will confirm that an email is sufficient to the provision of 2 written copies. Please note, only members of the governing body are entitled to vote. There are others amongst us who are here as visitors. Please do not vote, and when you do vote, please use the voting slips that have been provided in your packs. In relation to non-members, as always, can I ask for governing bodies permission by a show of hands to allow those who are visitors amongst us, our ecumenical guests and others as well, to participate, to speak. And in particular, Mr. Gwilym Dyfri-Jones, Provost of Lampeter and the Carmarthen campuses, is here. Mr. Jim Stewart, and of course our own, the Right Reverend Anthony Pogo, who has already addressed us in our Eucharist, who is Secretary General of the Anglican Communion. Are you happy to give en bloc a vote to their participation? Could you please show? Are there any opposed? Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Please do use the Welsh language. It is important that a bilingual church is confident in its bilingualism. If you are able to participate in the Welsh language, there are good translation facilities. Tudur is with us once more, and we welcome the use of Welsh language throughout our meeting. We've restored the practice of taking a collection you will already have noted in our Eucharist, and we're hoping to extend that through use of card payments as well. And I've nominated this year National Energy Action to benefit from our collection. They were present at our last governing body meeting and have been very much at the forefront of drawing our attention to the way in which the increase on gas and electricity, all energy costs, are impacting most of all those who are most vulnerable in our society, and are usually consulted by the government in the formation of policy, an independent charity, so your giving is much appreciated and will enable them to continue to do their good work. If you didn't make an opportunity to yourself to have to give earlier today, there will be another at evening prayer later. Can I now turn to that formal welcome? It's an absolute delight to welcome so many people from different constituencies here this morning, and I do want to run through them. First of all, of course, to the Right Reverend Anthony Pogo, Secretary General of the Anglican Communion, who will address us later in our meeting. But representing the Church of England, the Reverend John Carter, who is the Interim Vicar of Hope Church in Islington. Is John here? John, welcome. Delight to have you with us. Welcome. And then ar gyfer cytun mae ysgrifennydd cyffredinol newydd, sef Dr Cynan Lloyd, sydd yma yn rywle. So ti croeso cynnes Cynan, braf cael eich cwmni yma. Martin Spain, whom I've already seen, representing Cytun and the Covenanted Churches. Is Martin here somewhere? Wonderful. Welcome. Delight to have you with us. And then Jenny Heard, no stranger to the church in Wales, is the district chair for the Methodist Church in Wales. Jenny, you're here somewhere as well. Jenny, very croeso cynnes I chi hefyd. So wedi gweld Jeff Williams. Ydy Jeff yma o hyd? Jeff, croeso cynnes I meddwl, braf cael eich cwmni, sydd yn cynrychioli wrth gwrs undeb yr annibynwyr Cymraeg. And then Aneirin Owen, is Aneirin with us? Croeso Aneirin. Diolch yn fawr am ddod, braf cael eich cwmni yma. Representing Christian Aid Cymru, I know she is here. Mary McNeil is... Mary, give us a wave. Thank you. Lovely to have you here with us. And then Rebecca Elliott, Swyddog Addysg a Ieuenctid Cymru Education and Youth Officer. Is she here as well? Tomorrow. Lovely. We look forward to welcoming her as well. And then from the USPG, Carol Miller. Is Carol here? Carol, very warm welcome to you. Delighted you can join us. Thank you all. And you, of course, are fully here to speak to members of the governing body and do make yourself known to us. We turn to agenda item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th and 18th of April. Members have been asked to notify the Secretariat in advance of any changes to those minutes. No member has raised any point on those minutes. So by a simple majority of the governing body, are you willing to accept those as a true and accurate record? You are, please show. Are there any against? And are there any abstentions? There are none. Would you then allow me, please, to sign the minutes as a correct record of the meeting of the governing body held on the 17th and 18th of April 24? Just a little show of your cards and I will sign. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Thank you very much. In relation to item number 4, matters arising, once again you were asked to notify the Secretariat by the 30th of August of any matters arising. No comments have been received on the minutes. So I take that as read, and now I vacate the chair and ask Caroline Woodward to come and lead the governing body.
Borodar, good morning. Little did I think 20 or so years ago when I volunteered to proofread our local pew leaflet that I would end up chairing governing body. It's a privilege. We now move on to agenda number 5, the presidential address. You will all have had this emailed to you last night, and hopefully you've had a chance to read, mark and inwardly digest. You will have an opportunity to comment and ask questions after the presidential address. Archbishop.
Thank you. Andrew, Archbishop of Wales. I will be going slightly off script a little later, forgive me, but you'll see why. Dear friends, the Summer Olympics now behind us, or at least part of them. The Paralympics continue in Paris, and for the devotees, they did showcase and are showcasing the very best in world sport. Once again, shining a spotlight on the extraordinary efforts of people and athletes across our world. And I don't know if you followed, but I was so impressed by those who had so little financial support and have lived in the shadow of conflicts. For example, Cindy Ngampa, a Cameroonian boxer who represented the refugee Olympic team and the first ever medalist from that new constituency. Or Mohamed Amin Assalami, who fled war-torn Aleppo, crossing the Mediterranean on a rubber boat, by foot across the whole of Germany, and like millions and millions of others, simply in search of a place where he could build a future without bombs and without violence. He too, in the long jump, represented that new constituency, the refugee Olympic team. Each of those refugees spoke warmly of their gratitude that others helped and made a difference. It was others who made their journeys possible. And stories like theirs are a reminder that engagement across the divides, notwithstanding real and important political challenges, bring us closer together. The African proverb became a kind of motto for the whole of the games. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And as a church facing very different kinds of challenges and opportunities, perhaps we've seen something similar. In the governing body, as I've already mentioned, we will have welcomed Bishop Anthony Pogo, Secretary General of the Communion, and look forward to hearing him address us a little bit later. Our relationship with the Anglican Communion is just one example of where that motto comes true. We are better together. You see, our world is so fragile, and the things which help us build together can't be taken for granted. There needs to be a degree of intentionality in society, but also in the church. And so my address this autumn will focus attention on why togetherness is so important and why acts of co-discerning, co-conferring and co-creating are critical disciplines. And we ought to mark this intention with some scripture. This is a recording given by Jill Ireland, which I hope you will see behind me as well, that really focuses our attention and our thoughts.
Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." He said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice that said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Then the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way."
We know this passage so well and usually find good connections in the coming of God to a beleaguered prophet, all too aware of the encircling enemies, the challenges, and of course the paucity of resources. And the Lord was not in the earthquake, the wind, or the fire, but twice God addressed him in words almost identical. "What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here?" And later this year, we will gather from across the diocese to pray, to listen, and to learn. The learning community is not a gimmick to make us feel good about solidarity or being active, nor is it to wallow in the challenges that we face. It is to enable us to reflect and to embed, like Elijah, to pray for wisdom to answer that same question, what
are you doing? And the context for our gathering is significant because now all of the dioceses have configured their life within ministry areas. And this is a shift that it invites not primarily a change in governance, but the way in which mission and ministry is offered differently. Sharing resources together, a common commitment to a distinct area, building teams where the gifts of all of God's people are shared, looking outwards because God loved the world so much, and for one another to be bearers of good news for the sake of Christ. I'm going to say more about this, but now in Welsh, please do avail yourselves of the headsets if you want to. Oherwydd yn y gorffennol, nid oedd angen I ni ymddwyn fel eglwys yn yr un modd ag y mae'n rhaid I ni ei wneud yn nawr. Rydym wedi dod I weld faint yr ydym angen y gweinidogaethau amrywiol sy'n adlewyrchu'r charismau y mae Duw yn ei roi I ni. Rydym wedi gweld penodiadau newydd sy'n gwella ac yn ychwanegu at arweinyddiaeth werthfawr clerigion yr ardaloedd y gweinidogaeth. Mae Duw yn adeiladu eglwys a fydd yn dra gwahanol i'r un y bydyddiwyd ni ynddi. Ond mae'r eglwys sydd mewn sefyllfa well ac sydd wedi ei siapio'n fwy creadigol mwyn estyn allan mewn y gwasanaeth cariadus ac yng Nghrist Iesu. Ac rwyf am roi un enghraifft o hyn I chwi, a maddeuwch I mi, mae'n dod o fy ysgobaeth I fy hun, y gallwn ychwanegu at hyn gan esgobaethau eraill hefyd. Jill Island newydd wedi wneud y darlleniad yn caplan awyr agored cyntaf erioed Mro Eryri. Yn union wrth droed yr Wyddfa wrth gwrs. Swydd Jill yw cysylltu ar miloedd sy'n heidio yma, ond nad oes gan 95% ohonynt unrhyw gysylltiad ar eglwys o gwbl. Mae Jill yn gweinidogaethu yn ei geiriau a'i hun I garu, perthnasau a chreu. Mae ddasg hi yn ymwneud â gwrando, dysgu, cysylltu ac ymgysylltu ar gyfer perthnasoedd newydd, fel y gallwn adnabod calonnau pobl a darganfod sut y gallai Duw fod ar waith eisoes, a sut y gallwn ni ymuno ag Mae gweinidogaeth fel hyn yn ein dysgu I ddeall iaith unwaith eto ein y cymunedau, ac yn gofyn a allwn aros yn y lle hwnnw o ymddiriedais ac o ildio. Mae gan Dduw waith I ni ei wneud, a bydd ef yn ei ddatgelu. Mae'r cyfuniad hwn o waith nodedig o arloesol, ochr yn ochr anhymrwymiad I ardaloedd y gweinidogaeth, yn darparu ffordd newydd a chyffroes o weld tasgau fel eglwys. Ond gwell gyda'n gilydd. Bydd yn hanfodol bod yr hyn a ddysgur o'r cynulliad hwn yn cael ei rannu ar draws yr eglwys. Timothy Radcliffe, wrth gwrs, yr offeiriad Dominicanaidd, a wahalwyd I arwain enciliad yr eglwys Gatholig y Rufeinig yn ystod ar synodaeth y llynydd wedi ysgrifennu os grandawon ar yr arglwydd ac ar ein gilydd gan geisio deall a'i wyllus ar gyfer yr eglwys a'r byd, byddwn yn unedig mewn y gobaith sydd yn mynd y tu hwnt i'n hanghytundebau ac yn cael ein cyffwrdd gan yr harddwch mor hunafol ac mor newydd. What makes this picture so very hopeful is the way that churches have seen the significance of the Church Growth Fund initiative. Careful but really ambitious bids show a church that remains deeply hopeful and energized in the task of sharing good news. So I want to share with you some of the emerging themes and patterns that we ought to note. Firstly, Our bids are and need to arise out of our common vision and hope. They have to be deeply incarnational. What God is doing in the diocese now, rather than fitful bursts of energy which bear no relation at all to any direction of travel being set. Secondly, they need the underpinning of really good governance arrangements that ensures delivery and accountability. Our intention is not to throw money at projects. We will not bring people to Jesus that way. God does that. But we can invest in those who have particular gifts and particular callings to make Christ known. And lastly, we ought to feel uncomfortable. We really ought. These bids ought to challenge us to go into the wild places, to use the language of Elijah, to find ourselves leaning and depending ever more upon the Lord our God. We ought to feel the challenge of breaking new ground. I doubt for a second Elijah felt comfortable when God asked him to become dependent upon a raven for his bread and butter. But it was by that blessing came. Sisters and brothers, we've always been at our very best when we are courageous, and together we are better together. And so I want to say a little bit more about the way in which we can be better together in relation to one of our great challenges, namely the climate crisis and our environmental summit in the church later this year, supported by the good work of the representative body. 70 delegates together from all over the UK to confer together on the way in which we might restore Welsh rivers. We've amassed one of the largest gatherings of its kind after 18 months of preparation. It involves environmentalists, academics, representatives from the farming community, the church in Wales, the water industry, and other interest groups to confer together on the way in which the quality of water is to be improved. Now, of course, this is a deeply complex matter, and there are competing demands, all of which will require strong engagement and a clear articulation if we are to shape public opinion and if we're to find conversation translating into policy. And that's our intention, to create agreement about the principles, about the direction of travel, and to commit ourselves to a conversation where, if complete agreement isn't possible, how do we continue to talk? And I found it so intriguing when we decided, as the church in Wales, we were going to host this conference and take responsibility for a part of the landscape of Wales, challenged as we were. Why is the church sticking its nose in? Why are you involving yourself for which you have no mandate whatsoever? It's great when we interfere. It really is. Sometimes it's because people, particularly from the secular world, really don't like faith in the public square. And we need to be unapologetic that that is where we belong. Sometimes the fault is our own. We have not articulated a mission approach towards the environment which is radical enough, and yet it lies at the heart of the gospel. A church which really is radical in the way in which it engages with the world will address these serious issues of climate change, AI, poverty, and war. So the summit will invite the church, not just society, but us as well, to be real and engaged in the way in which we see our locality. As a result of this summit, we will commission new resources. We will launch new schemes like Adopt a River in your locality. We will show that the church in Wales is as committed to Wales as any organisation within it. But of course, we will be better together. Cymraeg unwaith eto. Soniais i am weliad yr esgob Anthony Pogo ar y ddechrau fan anerchiad ac rwyf am ddweud gair am y cymundeb Anglicanaidd yma. Mae ein sylw fel arfer yn cael ei hawlio ar anghytundebau yn ymwneud â materion rhywioldeb dynol, yn enwedig perthynas o'r un rhyw. Mae rhain yn wir yn faterion pwysig ac yn effeithio ar y ffordd yr ydym yn gwneud diwynyddiaeth. Sut yr ydym yn darllen yr ysgrythyr, yn deall traddodiad a lle rheswm. Ond dim ond gyda'n gilydd fel un corff y gallwn ni wneud hyn. Pan weddiodd Iesu i'r eglwys fod yn un, ni chynigodd hyn fel rhyw fath o ddeheuad. Uchelgais a gallym symud a thaith y tuag ato. Gweddiodd am ei fod o hanfod yr eglwys. Yng ngeiriau yr epistol at y Cristnogion yn Ephesus, y mae un arglwydd, un ffydd, un bedydd, un Duw a thad i bawb, sydd goriwch pawb a thrwy bawb ac hawb. Mewn geiriau eraill, a'i weddi oedd y gallem y fyw yn y gwirionedd, yn y reality a darganfod y gyson y llawenydd o fod yn un corff. Felly, ni allwn gerdded i ffwrdd oddi wrth ein gilydd. Haeri nad ydym mewn y cymundeb a'n holl frodyr a chwiorydd yn Christ. A mae ef wedi penderfynu ein bod ni. Yr hyn sy'n rhaid nodweddu ein bywyd yw ymrwymiad dwfn i'n gilydd mewn gweddi, ymgysylliad a chenhadaeth. Yn y pen draw bydd rhyw fath o ganlyniad fallai nat yw'n y ddatrysiad i'r sefyllfa arswydus yn Gaza. A cwestiwn felly, beth y wnawn ni fel cymundeb i helpu i adfer bywyd heddwch a gobaith ar ôl y sefyllfa yn cael ei wneud? Fy mrofiad i yw pan fydd cenhadu sy'n tystio i gyfiawnder a chariad Duw yn dod yn ffocws i ni, ein bod yn dysgu nad yw cymundeb yn ddim byd na pherthyn i'n gilydd yn Iesu a gwneud a'i waith. Ac o'n rhannu yn yr eglwys yng Nghymru, rhaid i ni sefyll yn barod, byddem yn gwneud yn dda i wneud yn well gyda'n gilydd. And here I am going a little bit off piste, I suppose. Last week I had the enormous privilege of sitting down with some Anglicans from Kyiv and hearing of their story, what life was like for them. I'm so grateful to the Reverend Dr. Rosie Diamond, who made that possible, and possibly even maybe a visit to Kyiv. Who knows? Let us see. But of finding in the midst of a terrible tragedy and an ongoing war, what it means to live faithfully under such threats. It was an extraordinary meeting for its simplicity, because sometimes when you're stripped back and you have so little, you return to some things that are very basic in life. Where do we put our trust? Do we really believe in a God who will provide more than we can ask or imagine? Do we find in one another the kind of comfort and consolation that roots us together as one in Jesus Christ? If the question of Gaza remains, so in Ukraine as well. But it will only be possible for us as Christians to exercise a kind of witness to these places and invest in the things of good news if we do it together. And so I began with Elijah and 1 Kings. Place yourself in his shoes just for a moment. Chased by enemies, hungry, beleaguered, what can you do but recite in a plaintive voice of your faithful acts to God? So vivid, so plain, so real. But when God meets him at the entrance to the cave and twice asks him about his mission action plan, something unexpected takes place. God sends him back. Exactly to do as he has been doing. No new mandate, no new deviation. But now the prophet is different. Now he's met with God. He's been addressed by God and compelled to reflect on the question he was asked. What are you doing? Reorientated and rejuvenated, Elijah responds, and he goes. Sisters and brothers, the same question lies before us. What are we doing? Like him, we will need to heed his voice and go to it. Together, better, with joyful confidence, attend to the work of God to make Christ known. What are you doing? May the answer be aloud. Amen. The Lord be with you.
Questions of the President about his address or to comment on his address. If you would like to do so, could I invite you please to come up to either side so that we have some idea of how many people would like to do that. A reminder that when you do that, if you could introduce yourself with your name and your diocese, and a reminder also that you have 5 minutes if you speak in English and 6 minutes if you speak in Welsh. So I would just like people to come up and make comments. Please do.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your address, which was wonderful. My name is Barney Hawthorne. I'm a lay member. I'm new to the governing body. It's my second meeting. And I thank you for your comments about the Church Growth Fund. I absolutely agree that it's important, and I know everybody in this room feels that it's incredibly important at this time. I was surprised, though, that there wasn't a specific item in the agenda, and I wonder whether this should be a standing item at each of these meetings, because I know that the governing body wants to be kept informed about this. I've noted there are some comments in some of the papers, and I understand that 2 dioceses have had applications considered. I presume that's only 2 at this stage, but we don't know whether they've been accepted. We don't know what other applications have been made, Tier 1 applications perhaps. And I think this information would be really very helpful. At an organisational level, I was sad to hear that the Director of Evangelism has stood down from that role, and wonder whether that job has been replaced as yet. And I feel that knowing more about the applications, whether they're successful, what does well, what doesn't do so well, is going to be incredibly helpful to inform us at a grassroots level, at a church level, at a ministry area level, and at a diocesan level to really get these applications right. I do believe very strongly that they should be incarnational, absolutely agree, but from my experience in medical research grant awards, having chaired a research grant committee for a long time, I also know that the objectives should be smart, they should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So it'd be nice to know whether we feel that we're on track. The Church Growth Fund has been active for 1 year, and I think it would be very helpful if we could be regularly updated about this. Thank you very much.
Rosie, I have noticed actually that the countdown clock isn't working. I've got to watch.
This is a motion, it's not timed. It's not timed because they're questions.
Sorry, I'm new at this. I've been told that it's not timed because of their questions. That does not give you an excuse to go on for 20 minutes. Rosie.
Rosie Diamond, clericwr Esgobaeth Bangor, roedd am siarad yn y Gymraeg. Wel, yn gyntaf, roedd am rhoi diolch. Diolch i chi a'r chesgob am eich anerchiad, a diolch i chi esgob Pogo am y bregaeth arbennig y bore yma, ac oedd, yn fy marn i, cymaint o gysylltiadau rhwng y ddau. Rwyf yn gwerthfawrogi ymroddiad yr Eglwys yng Nghymru i alluogi gweinidogaeth holl bobl Duw, ac rwyf yn gwerthfawrogi hefyd ymroddiad i ymgysylltu ar gyfwng newydd hinsawdd at adlewyrchu cariad Duw at holl greadigaeth Duw. A fi'n mor ddiolchgar i chi a'r chesgob am croesawu ffrindiau o Cif yr wythnos diwetha, chwiorydd sy'n cael profiadau mor erchyll. A fi eisiau just gofyn un peth. Fi'n cytuno'n llwyr bod na alwad i holl bobl Duw ar hyn o bryd bod yn arloesol. Ond fi'n ofni weithio ein bod ni'n trio bod yn arwrol yn lle rhoi'r holl gogoniant i Dduw. So dyma gwestiwn fi, really. Sut da ni'n medru galluogi ein gilydd i gyd i fod yn arloesol a cefnogi brodyr a chwiorydd mewn sefyllfaoedd anodd iawn yn bedwar ban byd, a hefyd cefnogi holl bobl yr eglwys lleol i fod yn arloesol. So y cwestiwn yw really cwestiwn sut da ni'n buddsoddi a sut da ni'n rhoi amser yn lle mynd yn rhy brysur yn fod yn arwrol yn lle i ni gyd fod yn arloesol. Diolch.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Crawford, Monmouth Diocese lay member. I'd like to ask the Archbishop, shortism. I'd like to ask the Archbishop about the Environmental Summit and what the timeline for this project is. Clearly, there is a big meeting in the autumn, but a project like this evidently takes more than one meeting. And I'd like specifically to ask whether the representative body has allocated resources for more than 1 year for this project. Thank you.
If there is anybody else who would like to make a comment or ask a question, could you please come up to the side now?
May I have permission to ask a question, please?
Please do.
Diolch. Just i ddweud diolch yn fawr iawn am y croeso i'r cyfarfod heddiw a cyfori. Mae'n bysser mawr. Diolch yn fawr. Dwi wrth fy modd efo'r cysyniad o'n well, ffordd yn ni'n well efo'n gilydd, dyn ni'n well gyda'n gilydd. Dyn ni'n well efo grwpiau a mudiadau seciwlar, dyn ni'n well efo'n gilydd fel enwad, fel yr Eglwys yng Nghymru. Ond fy nghwestiwn yw, sut mor bell mae bod yn well efo'n gilydd yn estyn? A dwi wedi credu ar hyd fy oes, dwi'n meddwl, os dydy'r cysyniad o bod yn well efo'n gilydd ddim yn estyn hyd at y gymuned Cristnogol cyfan yn y lle cyntaf, ydyn ni'n efo'n gilydd yn wir, ydyn ni wir efo'n gilydd os dyn ni ddim yn gweithio efo'n gilydd yng Nghrist. Dwi'n meddwl am yr ymgeisio ac ymdrechu dros enghraifft afonydd Cymru, y symud amgylchol, environmental, diolch. Oes na le enghraifft i wahodd i enwadau eraill, Cristnogion eraill, eglwysi eraill, i ymuno yn yr ymdrech na yn ogystal â'r eglwys yng Nghymru. So llais unedig gan y gymuned Cristnogol. A dwi'n meddwl mod i'n yma dwi'n gwisgo fy het fel cadeirydd cytun eglwysi yng Nghymru yn ogystal ag het yr Eglwys Fethodistaidd a het personol. Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr. A caniatad os gwelwch yn dda i siarad. Cynan Llwyd, ysgrifennydd cyffredinol cytun eglwysu ynghyd yng Nghymru. Mae cadeirydd cytun newydd siarad, a mewn ffordd mae wedi dwyn ynghwestiwn ansylwad i, ond da bod ni ar yr un wavelength, Jenny. Diolch ar Chesgob Andy am eich anerchiad a diolch Parchedig Pogo am eich pregaeth. A thema clir rhwng y ddau, thema o gydweithio o fod gyda'n gilydd yn unedig, oherwydd mae'r eglwys ar ei orau pan mae hi yn eglwys unedig. O'n i'n hoff iawn o be wedwch chi, Parchedig Pogo, pan ni yn gwynebu trychineb, mae'n bwysig i ni adeiladu pontydd yn hytrach na argeiau. A fy nghwestiwn i, neu o leia falle fy ngwahoddiad i, fel dwi'n herio a gofyn a gwahodd holl aelodau eglwysu ynghyd yng Nghymru, yw i ddefnyddio cytun fel y bont yna i ddod i undod eglwysig. A'r cwestiwn i chi yn benodol fel eglwys yng Nghymru, mae'n dda i ni cael y deheuad yma i ddod yn unedig. Ond beth ydyn ni yn ymarferol yn ei wneud o ddydd i ddydd, yn ein gweinidogaethau ni? Beth da ni'n wneud yn ymarferol i gyrraedd yr uniad yna? A mae yna wahoddiad ynglwm â'r cwestiwn ni i ddefnyddio cytun i ddod ynghyd gyda'ch gilydd ac aelodau arall cytun. Diolch yn fawr i chi.
Thank you. Archbishop.
Chair, thank you, Andrew Archbishop. So I heard 5 things in relation to the Church Growth Fund. Firstly, to say, yes, it's really important that the role that was vacated is going to be replaced, and it won't be a like-for-like role, but there is going to be new resource to enable that area of work to be overseen with energy and with new purpose. It is vital that we have feedback to the whole of the church. And I think that's one of the things that excites me about the learning community, because it's an opportunity for that act of co-conferring and co-discerning that I mentioned right at the outset to happen in a much wider body, and for the dissemination of information to be extended. But it can't remain there, of course. It's got to be something that has wider traction and a wider landing, a better landing in the whole of the church. And just to say, in terms of our communication around that, we will have developed a strategy for communicating really well and effectively with the whole of the church. And I'm grateful to colleagues who've already agreed to undertake that work, so that we do, as it were, cascade down across the whole of the church the things that we're hearing, the things that we're learning, and how we're growing together. And that's not just an exercise, I think, in information exchange. It's because I think we all believe, that discernment and wisdom sits within the whole body of Christ. And that the only way in which we can really, I think, develop and in God's grace grow is when we hear, sometimes from the margins, and sometimes from the sources that have no voice, and allow ourselves to be shaped by God's Spirit in ways perhaps that we've not expected. And we need to give plentiful opportunity for that to happen. So I think it's not just about information exchange, it's much more about the way in which we learn as a church and then share it. We will make that true too of the Church Growth Fund. We will give good reporting so that the Tier 1 and Tier 2 and what their bids involve and what their purpose is becomes known to the wider church. That's a really important point, and thank you for it. Rosie, thank you for your reflections further on Kyiv, and then how we ensure that we grow the whole church, not just in one area, how we deepen our resilience and our dependence upon Jesus Christ. I think my answer to that is that we have already, I think, within our life, the kind of training, resources and opportunities to support our ministry area leaders and our associates and our clergy to enable the whole gifts of the people of God to be recognised. But I think sometimes in the midst of a really, really busy life, and so often ministry areas are characterised by sometimes frenetic activity rather than focused, purposeful activity. And the way in which we'll get the most from people is when we have clarity about our purpose, what we're doing. I think we have more to do around MDR, and I know that Jeremy will be presenting to the bench to refine that document, to make it better still. And we have much, much more to do about the way in which we help people own the God-given gifts that they have. And again, I think that's work that is pending, but there are no proposals for that I have to bring today. Can I talk a little bit more then about the summit and some of the mechanics around that? There is a steering group which draws together from the farming community, from the NGOs, the environmentalists, and some of our academics. They've helped shape the programme, and they've overseen the way in which this summit and conference will be delivered. They're also responsible for enabling the, as it were, post-summit work to take place. Now, we've got a good idea of what some of that will involve. So let me give you a heads up. First of all, we anticipate that we will launch a charter for Wales, which will not just be aspirational, but it will have real body. It will contain proposals, for example, a call to ban wet wipes. When you talk to those within the water industry, they will tell you that they are the single biggest cause of blockages and some of the acute problems around sewage discharge that we face. Now, that charter will need to arise out of the summit and be owned by the summit, so I can't tell you much more about it yet. We've also kept open the possibility that the summit will throw up things that we don't yet know. So even though we have a commitment to develop beyond the summit into the years ahead, what that will involve, I think, very much depends on what the summit does, how it responds to some of the challenges. I mean, let's be honest here. There could be some real disagreements at this summit. There could be some real sparks and fireworks, because we're bringing together people who have very different agendas, the competing demands of food sustainability against the use of our phosphorus chemicals. There's real tension here. So we're going to have to work really, really hard together to get something that's purposeful. But I know that not just the work more widely within society, but for the church, some of the schemes that we're proposing, and there'll be resources which ministry areas can adopt. There will be no compulsion. We don't want to just make ministry areas ever more busy, but for those for whom this is a passionate concern, we can help and we can make those resources available. And that will take, I suppose, probably 6 to 8 months. Just to remind you, the representative body have been extraordinarily generous here. They have funded the whole of this summit. And that, again, has had such an impact on others outside, seeing the church in Wales being serious, putting its money, as it were, in areas of real concern. My suspicion is that there won't need to be much of a budgeted addition beyond year one. If there is a slight budget, I'll come with my tail between my legs to the chief executive and to the chair of the representative body saying we need more help. I don't think there will be a resourcing issue. Ecumenism is one of the great challenges that we face of our today. And one of the things, if I can unite Jenny, yours, and then Cannan's, your questions together, what can we do practically? One of the things that I found most exciting is having the opportunity to meet, as I did earlier this year, and will do again next year, with some of the key leaders. And Jenny, you were present for some of that meeting. Cannan, I don't think, was. To hear about some of the joys and sorrows of being a Christian minister, a Christian leader in a very, very challenging environment. So less as it were, structural ecumenism, but much more ecumenism of what are you noticing on the ground. And when I hear of one of our sister churches talking about investing in between 12 and 16 pioneers, I get excited. And I want to hear more about that, because I suspect there is a learning to be had from which we ourselves can gain. I think there are opportunities for us to share with others our experience as well. Some of you might have been following what's happening in the Roman Catholic Church on synodality. I mean, this is extraordinary. Probably the most, I suppose, hierarchical of all of the churches under Pope Francis's leadership, bringing together people so they can pray and listen and ask together, what is God saying in our midst? If you want a really good read, Timothy Radcliffe's Reflections on Synodality is worth a read out now. He was as I said in my address, the leader of the reflections, the spiritual reflections. A church discerning, not unlike us, that we need a wider, deeper wisdom that subsists across the whole of the church. Now, when we find a forum and we find a way in which we can do this together, and I have to be honest, I'm not sure that we've done that yet. I don't believe that we have yet found a way of doing that in a way that's genuinely open and honest and purposeful. But for my part, that's the pearl of great price. That's what I would love to see when we are students together in the same school, when we are patients in the same hospital, all of us like beggars at the feast, in need of bread to share with one another. It's then that I think God will bless us, and we will find together as Christians sharing a common commitment to Wales, we will find our unity in Jesus Christ. May that day come soon. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. We now come to agenda number 7, which is a report from the Bench of Bishops, and the Bishop of St David will introduce the report, and then there will be a chance for you all to ask questions about that report. Bishop.
Dorian Davies, Esgob T. Ddewi. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of the Bench of Bishops to thank whoever presents us at the beginning of each governing body with a small bag of gifts. It's very much appreciated, though unexpected. However, if anybody else wants to give gifts, we will provide a box as you leave. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the regular Bench of Bishops report. I will assume that you have read the report ahead of today's gathering, so I won't go through it in detail. However, I suggest you have a copy of the report in front of you, and if you look for it in the interactive agenda, choose your language and click on the report itself, or if you use the drop-down buttons, it may be found in the folder entitled Session 1. Then choose English or Cymraeg to view the report in either language. I hope that made sense to you. Since we last met as a governing body, we have met as a bench on 3 occasions. And in late April, we had the honour of attending the biennial Celtic Bishops meeting in County Cork, Ireland. The next gathering is in 2026, and I'm delighted that the Church in Wales will be acting as hosts. It was good to be with our fellow bishops at that event, and I learned such a lot about the Celtic Church. And the Celtic Irish bishops have hollow legs. The report provides a summary of the varied and diverse topics that we have discussed and reviewed, and I would especially like to draw your attention to the Church in Wales priorities. These were discussed by the Standing Committee at their meeting in June, and we all recognise the importance of not only getting them right, but also ensuring that they are as relevant in Welsh as in English. There's more work to be done here, and we will be revisiting this important subject when we meet next. I apologise that the reference to the priorities in the presidential address was not evident. However, you can make it up as you go along, if you like. But the important thing is the priorities are very much based on what we believe as Christians. We preach Christ crucified, and the light of the resurrection of our Lord and Saviour, Jesus Christ, colours everything that we do. Mae goleuni'r atgyfodiad yn gwneud gwahaniaeth mawr I pob un ohonom ni wrth I ni edrych ymlaen i'r dyfodol a gwneud y pethau sydd yn gymeradwy yn golwg Duw ac hefyd yn golwg yr eglwys. Ac mae rhaid I ni gyd cydweithio I sicrhau bod hwn yn digwydd, nid yn unig yn ein wahanol esgobeithau, ond yn y dalaeth yn gyfan gwbl. The candidates panel, we meet with the Director of Ministry Development to discuss the formation of a body to report and advise bishops on a range of issues for individuals moving towards ordination or in the early stages of their ministry. This should be seen as an extension of the Provincial Discernment Panel and not a replacement. International Anglican Liturgical Consultation. We continue to play an active role in the life of the Anglican Communion and contributed our reflections on 2 of these recent documents. Maes sydd yn agos at ein cylonnau ac yn enwedig I fi fel yr esgob sydd â chyfrifoldeb portffolio dros y Cymraeg a dwyieithrwydd yw'r Cymraeg. Fel esgobion, rydym wedi cytuno ar ffyrdd syml o gadarnhau ac annog amrywiaeth ieithyddol. I annog clerygwyr, darllenwyr lleug ac arweinwyr addoli I gyflwyno rannau o'r gwasanaeth yn Gymraeg. Enghraifft, gweddi'r arglwydd. I awgrymu y gall y genulleidfa neu'r unigolyn weddio yn yr iaith y maent yn teimlo'n fwyaf cyffwrddus ynddi ac o ddewis personol. Mae hwn yn angenreidiol I ni sicrhau lles dyfodol yr Eglwys yng Nghymru a'r iaith Cymraeg. Mewn cyd-destun ehengach, rydym bob amser yn awyddus I glywed am unigolion sydd â sgiliau iaith, yn enwedig mewn Ffrangeg, Almaeneg, Sbaeneg neu Eidaleg, neu unrhyw iaith arall, ac am y rhai sydd yn gallu cynrychioli'r eglwys yng Nghymru mewn cyfarfodydd ecumenaidd rhyngwladol a chynadlaethau neu ddigwyddiadau eraill lle byddai defnyddio'r ieithoedd hyn o fantais. Os ydych yn y categori hwn a bod gennych ddiddordeb, rowch wybod I staff y dalaeth neu swyddfa eich esgob. There has been no change to the portfolios of bishops' provincial work, but there have been some subtle changes, not least Bishop David coming into post as Bishop of Bardsey. Other matters, page 4 of your report details a number of other areas in which we have been involved. The report is invariably administrative in its content, but I would like to reassure a governing body that our discussions are always spirit-led and centred on the gospel that we have all the privilege to profess. We work very closely together, and the spirit of the bench allows us to have open discussions and to work collegiately to ensure the governance of the province and our respective dioceses as we pull together to face the challenges and take on opportunities. And we're always respecting and valuing the diversity of the Church in Wales. This makes us unique within the context of the Anglican Communion and our association with other church communities. I became very aware of the respect held for the Church in Wales and its relevance when I recently represented the bench and the province at the consecration of the new Bishop of Iceland. I was there from Friday to Monday. So I commend our report to the governing body, and I'm sure that the respective bishops in regards to their specific portfolios will be happy to respond to any questions or comments.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you. So we now have an opportunity to ask questions about the Bench of Bishops report, and these questions should be confined to the report, unless, of course, anybody's got any suggestions about where Bishop Dorian could go on his next trip. So please, if you do have any questions, could you line up at the sides of the hall? And a quick reminder, name and diocese, please. Stella.
Stella Bailey, Diocese of Monmouth. Just a quick question. Will the report, Walking in Integrity, be published for wider consumption, please?
Yes.
Anybody else?
Tony Mullins, Llandaff. My question is to Bishop John, really, on evangelism and church growth. We've established our ministry areas now, and every diocese has achieved the goal. There's still a lot of pain. There's still a lot of hurt in churches that have been closed or about to be closed. There are parishioners, and this is where I come from. I represent people in the pews, or in my particular instance, in the choir stalls. There's a lot of growth, and it's exciting growth. We have to accept it, but it's a little bit like, for me, the Emperor's New Clothes. This is what we've got. Can you see it? And then there's a lot of feeling of hurt, of abandonment, of neglect, at the base roots. We are working through it. There are schemes, and our own particular bishop has been extremely busy in our particular ministry area as our archdeacon, but it still exists. There's still a lot of work to do about helping people through this painful change. And what part of the evangelism and church growth do you see addressing that? Thank you.
Bishop John?
Bishop John Swansea and Brecon. Yeah, I feel your pain. I was a parish priest. I've been a ministry area or a mission area leader in 2 different mission areas, as well as archdeacon and now bishop. I think one of the questions we need to ask ourselves is how joined up we are as a province before we can work provincially. Many of our ministry areas, our mission areas, operate in slightly different ways. That's been confusing, but more than that, I think we need to base ourselves well as a province before we can move forward together. There are things going on that are very exciting, like you said, in individual dioceses, and we're all doing things slightly different, and there is light at the end of the tunnel in that respect. In terms of the evangelism now, Pioneering Evangelism Network, we've even made the name a lot easier now. There's been some reordering of how we operate as an evangelism group across a province. And so all of the bishops have been written to, asking which individuals might best serve us for mission and evangelism in our diocese. And we've had our first conference earlier on this year where we got together all of those people that have been suggested from across the province, and we spoke about the very things that you've just spoken about now. And we've begun to focus on where we can really act well as a province in terms of evangelism and mission. We're all doing different things. Leipzig, we've been doing that in St Asaph, we're doing that in Swansea and Brecon, and I think Monmouth, I've seen it in part of the bid in Monmouth, that they're working towards Leipzig. There are certain tools that we can use that will take away some of the fear surrounding evangelism, or some of the fear of talking about what mission might look like, and also will engender a community where we feel that we are together, whether we are a small church or whether a large church, whether we've lost our building or where we haven't lost our building. Each and every one of us is vitally important, and we're all made in the image of God. And so we're really in the embryonic stage now of reordering what evangelism and mission might look like in terms of a province. And I hope that through the GB, Standing Committee and other places like that, that we can keep you more informed. But there is a lot going on. I'd like it to be more joined up than it is, but I suspect all of us would like that as well.
Thank you. You'll all be glad to know now that we've come to lunchtime.
There's one more speaker.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry, there's one more speaker. If there is anybody else who wants to speak, could you please come up?
Thank you. Annabelle Ellertson. I'm a clergy member from the Diocese of Swansea and Brecon. It's a very quick question. I've been looking through the list of portfolio concerns, and it's really lovely to see that there are so many areas the church is working in. I didn't see on the list, but I know it is actually happening, but rather secretly, older people's ministry. I think, am I right that Bishop Mary covers that? Or no? No? If not, does anybody? You know, is it there? It's a big thing. I know there are associations with kind of declining. I mean, it's not a long-term project, obviously, with each person we work with, but it is a growth area. And it does actually have an impact on other people as well as the older people, you know, family members. It connects with. They see the joy and the comfort and the peace that it brings to their granny or their aunt or whoever. And it's an important area of ministry. And I just think it would be nice if it was on that list. Thank you. Bishop David.
David Morris, Bishop of Bardsey. Thank you very much for pointing that out. I think that would fall in my brief under chaplaincy, and so we'll add it to the sort of list of chaplaincies that I would liaise with, but wholeheartedly agree with you on that front. And Anna chaplaincy is something that we are rolling out in the Diocese of Bangor, something that's hugely important, and so absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, now it's time for lunch. As we're going to lunch at 12:15, could I please ask you to be back by 1:15, ready to start, when the Venerable Paul McNess will take the chair for item 8, which is about the Advent course for this year. Thank you very much. Bon appetit.
Thank you. Was that your maiden point?
Yes.
Wow.
Is it on there?
That's funny. Very cool. I've got a telephone.
Good, good, good. The last time I was the chair
Oh, right, so you have experience.
This is the first time, and it's sort of a learning process, isn't it?
Yes, and the truth